Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for joining us on the live stream. We're very excited to be here to share with you prototyping voice experiences, design sprints for Google Assistant.
You know what, Kai? They sent all the hippest and coolest and best-looking people at I/O right here.
Yeah. You guys are looking good. I'm Kai Haley. I lead the design relations team here at Google, and I'm also one of the founding members of our Sprint Master Academy. So I'm pretty passionate about design sprints.
And I'm Wally Brill. I'm the head of conversation design, advocacy, and education here in beautiful downtown Mountain View. And I'm really stoked because I spend my life helping people create conversations with robots. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about today.
So today, we're going to talk about how you can apply our voice action design sprint model to prototyping experiences for the Google Assistant. For those of you who are not familiar with design sprints, we have some great resources out there for you, and we recommend you check out our website, designsprintKit.google.com. At a high level, design sprints were created at Google to help teams shortcut the traditional product development process, to get to learnings faster so they can make better decisions about the direction of their products. The framework is organized into 6 phases to support divergent and convergent thinking. And this is really founded on traditional UX practice. In the understand phase, a cross-functional team comes together to explore the problem space from 360-degree angles and really develop deep empathy with their users. In the define phase, the team will then determine which area they want to focus the sprint on and where they're going to have the most value for their users. Then the entire team sketches a broad range of ideas in the sketch phase, basically creating a hypothesis of what will meet their users' needs. Then, as a team, we decide what to prototype for the user test at the end. So that's a high-level look at design sprints. The framework is very flexible, and on our website, we have the core set of methods, which you can see here. But today, what we're going to be talking about is the voice action sprint model, which is really a combination of the traditional design sprint with a role-playing workshop, and that's where the conversation design is happening. The voice action sprint framework that we've created and prototyped over the last year has 8 phases. And we've done this in order to include role-playing and iteration. And we're going to go through the methods in detail today so that you can run a voice action sprint yourselves. Here's the list of them. As we mentioned, there are resources online for you to learn more about them.
So when do we want to use a voice action design sprint? What's a reason to use it? So in a situation in which you're trying to determine a direction for a product, for a voice product, in a situation where you're trying to determine the brand persona, the actual personality of a brand, or you're trying to create and develop dialogue for the action, these are all great reasons to use a voice action design sprint. On the other hand, we don't need to do it if we already have our dialogue, if we already have our persona nailed down, and we know what we're actually going to be building. At that point, we can go straight into the prototyping area.
So, as with any design sprint, planning is really critical to the success of the sprint. You're going to have a group of people together for a dedicated period of time, and you want to use their time effectively. So the first thing to do is define the challenge and scope the sprint appropriately. We have some examples that can illustrate how you might scope your sprint. Earlier this year, we ran a sprint with Filtrete, which is 3M's air filtration product. And with them, we were developing a unified vision for the voice experience of their suite of air filtration products. So you can see this is a really broad sprint. We're including visioning work as well as a number of products. And the deliverables that this sprint yielded were key use cases, brand persona, and validated voice prototypes. Another sprint we ran this year was with H&M, and we scoped it this way. Identify opportunities to better meet the needs of H&M's existing customers through voice assistants. And you can see here, we're looking for a couple of opportunities, so it's a little bit more narrow, and we're also focusing on a specific audience, the existing customers. In this instance, we also created key use cases, brand persona, and validated voice prototypes. You can also narrow your sprint down in other ways. For example, you might look at a specific use case or a specific context. For example, you could scope the sprint this way: define the voice experience for daily tasks that could integrate into routines. And routines is a feature of Google Assistant, where you can set up daily things that you want done. You will always want to create a brand persona, and you might want to identify a specific number of tasks that you'd like to prototype. There's a couple other things that you'll want to do in the planning phase. As in a normal design sprint, you'll want to schedule your lightning talks in advance, and these are very important because they are the inputs for the ideation portion. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. You're going to want to design your sprint team. It's very important that you have the right people there. If you don't have a conversation designer on your team, you're going to want to recruit one for the sprint. And a developer familiar with Dialogflow is very valuable if you're going to want to create a Dialogflow prototype. Of course, you're going to want to recruit 5 user test participants and secure any devices or recording equipment that will be needed. Then you'll be ready to move into the understand phase, where we're going to go through lightning talks. We're going to use how might we sharing and affinity mapping to identify opportunities, and an experience map to look for pain points and build more empathy with our users. Now, I mentioned lightning talks. These are the inputs for your brainstorm, so they're really important. They help set the context for the problem solving in the sprint. With a voice action sprint, because we're working on a relatively new platform in potentially a new space, conversation design might be new for your team, there's going to be an educational component. And you'll want to bring lightning talks that cover conversation design principles, the idea of open-ended versus guided conversations, and great conversational task examples so you can inspire people on potential tasks you might want to design for. And Wally's going to talk us through the ideas behind these lightning talks.
Thank you. So, a couple of things we want to keep in mind. When we're talking about these lightning talks, we're really talking about principles of conversation and things we need to know before we go into a design phase. So one of the things that's important to keep in mind is that visual design and conversation design are radically different. Visual design persists. I can look up the page to see what's come before. I can look down the page to see what comes after. I can't do that with conversation design. Conversation design is inherently linear and ephemeral. It goes by in real time, so I have to capture the things that I need in real time so that I can hold them in memory. We also like to talk about, in terms of the principles of conversation design, Paul Grice's maxims. Paul Grice was a linguist philosopher who came up with the cooperative principle. And the cooperative principle is really the idea that when two people have a conversation, they want their contributions to be truthful, informative, relevant, and clear. And the reason is they want the conversation to succeed. So we help each other in a conversation. We know when to give the turn, we know when to take the turn. We're propelling the conversation forward all the time. Now let me tell you a little bit about open-ended versus guided conversations. It's perfectly normal in a situation in which I know the domain that I'm dealing with for me to say something like, how can I help you? Let's listen to this.
Welcome to Acme Widget. How can I help you?
It's a totally open-ended question, right? Any number of answers. I want a hot dog, I want to paint my Camaro gold, all kinds of possible things I could say there. So I need to constrain the area that's available in terms of possible responses. So let's take a look at what United Airlines did to help people understand what their action could do.
Welcome to United Airlines. Please begin by saying, what is the status of my flight, or check me into my flight. How can I help you?
What's the status of my flight? check me into my flight. So now let's move on. When was the last time you reached into the refrigerator and you pulled out that chicken you were going to cook for dinner? And you're holding it, and it's a little yucky, we have to admit, but we forgot the recipe we were going to use to cook. What do? This is what we call the raw chicken moment. There's nothing you can do with your hands. You're not going to reach into your pocket and pull out your phone and start tapping through apps, right? You're not going to touch a touch screen because your hands are covered in chicken. Eesh. So what do? We use our voice. And we use a voice-forward application. Let me show you what Tasty does. Tasty helps us with recipes. Here's what they sound like.
Okay, Google, talk to Tasty.
Sure, here's Tasty.
Welcome back. Would you like to continue making chocolate fudge box brownie cheesecake?
No, thank you.
Okay, what are you in the mood for?
Cheesy asparagus quiche.
Sure, here you go. Does this look good?
Cheesy asparagus quiche always looks good. Okay, just remember that. Put that in your notes. Cheesy asparagus quiche always looks good. Let me give you some examples of some other conversational tasks. So when you're selecting your task to create the action, remember, something people can do in conversation, something you can do with your eyes and hands busy, and something that has value. Here's Headspace. Headspace provide meditations, right? When you had a jangly kind of day and things are all kind of crazy, you contact Headspace and you get some meditation action. Check this out.
Welcome back to Headspace. You can repeat today's meditation, try a sleep exercise, or unlock more meditations. What would you like to do?
Today's meditation.
Today's meditation.
Beginner's mind is something to bring to every moment in life, not only to our meditation. So whether you're watching the breath or eating some food, be curious, as if for the first time.
So, little meditation. And Sephora brings us beauty and skincare advice. It'll tell me what kind of skin I have, beautiful of course, perfectly supple. And it'll tell me how to take care of my beautiful and supple skin. Have a listen.
Welcome to the Sephora Skincare Advisor. Great skin starts here. Would you rather discover your skin type or hear a skincare tip?
I should probably hear a skincare tip. And Filtrete that Kai was just talking about. So Filtrete creates smart filters for air purifiers. And those smart filters are really smart. They'll tell you when they need replacing, and the action will actually give you information about air quality. Let's
Your
have a
home
listen.
filter has 5% left and needs to be replaced soon. What else can I help you with?
Well, that's enough. I better replace my filter.
So, in addition to these lightning talks, you'll want to also bring research about your audience. Who is it that you're designing for? How do you think about them? What are their needs? And in this context, you'll want to understand how familiar are they with voice assistants? Are they currently using voice-based products? And there are a number of sources of data that you can go to get information about your users. You can go to your contact call center and see what they're trying to accomplish with voice today. That's a great resource. Or you can do more traditional user research like diary studies, interviews, or participant observation. But the important thing here is to understand the context in which somebody is going to be completing a task with your product. And what are the concerns that you might have in that context? Are they in a public space? Do you need to be worried about privacy? Really think about where you're positioning these people when they're using your product. After you've built shared knowledge as a team in the understand phase with the lightning talks, you're going to do a how might we sharing and affinity mapping exercise. And this really helps the team to identify opportunities and really understand the problem space together. At this point, you'll choose a specific area that you want to focus on, potentially a good idea for your conversational tasks. You can also use experience mapping. This is a method from traditional sprints as well, which is really helpful for putting yourself into the shoes of your user and identifying more pain points and opportunities, ways that you can help them. The nice thing about an experience map is it helps you step above your current product experience and look at the context in which a user is trying to solve a problem. And this provides more opportunities for how you can integrate meaningfully into their lives. And now you're ready to move into the define phase, where in a voice action sprint, you want to create a brand persona. We're also going to look at what's the user value that we can offer to our users and agree upon success metrics.
Let's talk about persona for a second. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. We talk about brand persona. What is a persona? Now, how many of you people brought a persona with you today? A show of hands? Great. Actually, you all did. It's a trick question, but thank you. Here's the thing about brand persona. A brand has an identity. It has dimensions. Just as with a person, within a second and a half of hearing a voice, we intuit all kinds of things about who we're listening to. So too, when the brand has a voice, we'll intuit all kinds of things about that brand. So we have to do a design job to create the right persona to match the brand identity. Now, in that first second and a half of hearing a voice, you get a sense of register, which is the social status of that entity in relation to me. Is it my peer? Is it my superior? Where does it sit in the pecking order? We get a sense of gender. We get a sense of age. We get a level of education. And we also, if they have an accent, get a sense of locale. But even more, we intuit intelligence, trustworthiness, and likability. In the first second and a half of hearing a voice, it's something we unconsciously and automatically do. We create an image in our own mind of who we're listening to. So it's absolutely vital that brands bring their essence to the table and define and create a brand persona that matches that essence. Let me give you an example of a really cool persona. So if you've got kids, anybody here have kids? You know who the Wiggles are? Yeah? Everybody loves the Wiggles. So Emma Wiggle is the persona of the Wiggles Choose Your Own Adventure story. And she's out to find her friends who are missing. She's got to go to a concert tonight. Let's have a listen.
Hi there, it's Emma Wiggle. You're here just in time. There's a Wiggles concert today, but I can't find any of my friends. Why don't you help me look for them?
Yeah, I'll help look for them. Now, H&M, as Kai mentioned, we did a sprint with them. They had a really interesting idea. They wanted to create a fashion and style maven, somebody who was a friend of yours, but who also knew everything there was to know about style, everything there was to know about fashion, and could help you find products and choose gifts.
Hi again. Do you want to find a new gift? Or have a look at the things you've saved last time?
Find a new gift.
Do you know what you are looking for? Or would you like help with some suggestions?
I usually need help with suggestions. Hi?
So in addition to creating that brand persona, you're going to want to align it to the user value that you're offering. A user value matrix is a really helpful method for mapping where your conversational task is going to fit onto this matrix. It can really range from something very simple to something complex, or utilitarian to entertaining. And we saw some of those examples earlier today. They fell in various areas on this spectrum. And you'll really be thinking about how does my product fit in here, and where am I going to want to be focusing my conversational task? And then it's always good to align the team on what does success look like for this product, and how are we going to measure it? So you can identify what are the success metrics that you're going to be collecting later once you've launched this product. Now you're ready to move into the sketch and decide phase. And this is where we use traditional design sprint methods like Crazy 8 sketching to create a broad range of ideas, assumptions and sprint questions to make sure that we're testing the right thing, and deciding on what the conversational task will be. So for those of you who are not familiar with Crazy Eights, this is a fun method from game storming where the entire team sketches and tries to generate 8 ideas in 8 minutes. It's a very fast exercise, but that added pressure helps people to push beyond their first idea and get more creative. Then the team will each individually present their ideas to help everyone understand what are the ideas that they might want to pursue. Each person gets about 3 minutes to present their ideas, and then they move into the assumptions exercise, which we highly recommend you do this. This is where you take a look at all the ideas generated and identify what are the unknowns. What are the assumptions that you're making around what people will do, what behavior people will engage with? And translate those into questions, because a design sprint is really a tool to answer a question and get learnings. And this will then help to determine which ones do you want to prototype in order to get learnings. Then, as a team, you'll decide which one of these tasks are we going to test. And you're really limited by the length of time of the user test. A traditional usability test is about 45 minutes, so you'll look at how long is this task. You might be able to prototype 3 tasks if they're relatively short, but you'll work back from that limitation. And now we move into the role play, iterate, and decide phases, where you're really going to be doing the conversation design. We use improv warm-ups, multiple rounds of role play, and then critique and conversation repair at the end.
Let me talk to you about some of this. So we use methods from improv to workshop the dialogue. What we're trying to do, what we want to come out with out of this exercise, is what we call a sample dialogue. A sample dialogue is like a play with 2 characters. There's a user and there's an action, right? The robot and the user. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have people play those parts, and we're going to have the conversation and try and get to that dialogue that works best. So what we'll do is we'll sit people in chairs back to back, because we don't want them to use any of the micro-expression cues that we have when we're having a conversation face-to-face. You know when it's your turn to talk because you can see that I'm finishing my sentence, right? So we don't want those cues, so we sit people back to back to simulate a voice-only conversation, right? What we need to know is that the brand persona comes through clearly, that character that we've created. We want to know that we're creating a clear path forward at every dialogue turn for the user. We want to be natural and we want to be brief, but we want to make sure the persona flavor still stays in there, right? We want to ask easy questions. We don't want to overload anybody. And what's really fun is, say you were creating an action for somebody to use in the car. Well, you might pick a book up and turn it into a steering wheel and be driving while you're having the conversation with the persona that's sitting behind you. The next thing we'll do is we'll critique with the team. So we're looking at whether the introduction works. We're looking at if the brand persona comes across exactly as it was designed. Is it clear? Is the conversational natural and realistic? We know from research that the more natural the conversation is, the more successful the user is going to be, because they don't have to learn anything new, right? They know how to have a conversation. And we want to know that there's a clear call to action or a question at the end of every dialogue turn. Every time the assistant says something, there'll be a call to action at the end of what it says. Now, we'll do that again. Once we've had that first review, we'll give the notes to those folks who are performing the conversation, and they'll do it again. And this time, they'll capture it on Post-it notes, and they'll put it up on a chart. Because by the time they've done that, we should have a pretty cogent and complete conversation that we could prototype from. The next piece we want to talk about, and we'll give a lightning talk around this generally, is about contextual repair. I like to call it when bad things happen to good people, right? You're having a conversation with the assistant, everything's hunky-dory, everybody's understanding everybody, and all of a sudden the dog barks. Right? Oh, I got your attention with the dog bark. When the dog barks, the system doesn't know what it just heard. It has no idea what dog bark means. And so it throws what we would call an error. And we need to repair that. We need to get back on track. So there are mechanisms to do that with, and that's what we talk about in terms of the conversational contextual repair.
So now we're ready to move into prototyping. We've got a very close to finish conversation flow, and you're going to decide what kind of prototyping you want to use, whether you're doing voice recording, Wizard of Oz, or dialogue flow, and then you'll prepare your final script for the interview. So at this point, you're going to want to incorporate that contextual repair piece into the conversation, document it very clearly so you have something to hand off to begin prototyping, and really think about the task that you're asking users to complete from an end-to-end perspective, focusing on the user test. What are you going to bring into that usability test? And here is a little example of how you might be editing along as you're going. This is from the Phil Treat sprint, and they were really looking at what's the right level of technical detail we should be providing to people when they're asking about air quality, and can we get them interested in indoor air quality? If you decide to do a dialogue flow prototype, you'll be creating this with the text-to-speech computer-generated voice. And you're able to prototype something very quickly in real code that you can play on a device. So there's some benefits there. You're a little closer to an actual launchable product, but it is harder to adjust on the fly in the user test. The alternative is to use voice recording and create a Wizard of Oz prototype. When you defined your brand persona, you decided you wanted to use a human voice, then you'll use this type of prototyping. You'll have to record all the clips that you've laid out in that flow, so you'll have your voice actor there with you and your recording equipment, and you'll want to consider what are the edge cases, what are the potential responses your user test participant might give you. You'll number and arrange them very easily for retrieval in accordance with your user interview script. And then you're going to want to think about, how do I set this up so you have the person behind the curtain playing these recordings? And along the way, with both the dialogue flow and the Wizard of Oz prototype, you're going to write your user interview script. You want to set the context for the users so they understand what is the task that they're going to complete. Write open-ended interview questions so you get really good, useful feedback. And then align the prototype to this script. Make sure there isn't a point at which you don't have a voice clip for a specific point in the task. And review it with the team for any potential gaps before you go into that usability test. And now you're ready for the most exciting part of the sprint, where you get to actually see people interacting with your ideas. You're going to set up the test environment, run the usability test, and gain your learnings, synthesize and evaluate those learnings as a team, and then identify next steps. So setting up the environment for good feedback means that you really want to make it as real as possible. And in a lot of these situations, you want people to actually act out completing a task. And if it's a hands-free type of task, you want to make them feel like they're comfortable acting this out. So you're really trying to create a real experience. Make them comfortable, but also iterate as you go if you find that it isn't working quite right. It's okay to adjust. And while you're running this usability test in your usability lab, the team is in another room observing and collecting the feedback. User feedback matrix like this is really helpful. You can align the participants' feedback to the specific questions that you wanted to have answered. In a voice action sprint, it's really important to decouple the feedback that you're getting about, say, the platform or interacting in a voice format from the actual conversational task. Because here what you're trying to do is find out, is this task going to be useful for them? Is it going to provide value? Are they going to engage with it and do it? So you'll want to review against your questions, and you'll want to synthesize those findings as a team so that you can decide what to prototype or what to move forward in the future. A good example is from the Filtrete sprint. Through the user test, they were able to learn what the right level of information is to address indoor air quality questions, outdoor air quality questions as well. And they were able to engage people in conversation about indoor air quality through the outdoor air quality test. And they defined a vision for their connected home air filtration products. So what happens after the sprint is equally as important as what happens in the sprint. I highly recommend that people document all the learnings and everything that's created in the sprint during the sprint itself, so you can walk away with a deck for stakeholders' approval. You might need to schedule follow-up testing. You'll have learned something in your test, and you might want to iterate and test again. And of course, you're going to want to identify what's your timeline for development and create a product roadmap to help you get to launch. And so we hope you'll try this out.
Do try this at home.
We have some resources for you. There's some lightning talks on YouTube. You can go to the Google Developers channel and look for those there and bring them into the understand phase of the sprint. And we have our website, designssprintkitwithgoogle.com, where there are templates and decks that you can download to use. And if you'd like to learn more about building your first action, there's a talk this afternoon at 5 p.m. And tomorrow, there'll be a talk on 10 best practices for high-quality actions. And you won't want to miss the designing quality conversations on Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, that's particularly a great one, because our own Kathy Pearl is doing that one.
Fantastic.
And with that, thank you very much. You've been wonderful.
Thank you.